Welcome to the Broken System Podcast. I'm your host, Robert, and joining me is my insightful co-host, Lexi. Together, we're here to uncover the flaws and challenges within our justice system, where fairness and equality often fall short.
In this podcast, we aim to delve into the complexities of our justice system and explore the experiences and perspectives of those who have been affected by its shortcomings. We'll dive deep into the stories of individuals who have faced injustice and examine the systematic issues that perpetuate the broken system.
Our goal is to bring awareness to the disparities and biases that exist within our justice system, and to inspire our listeners to take action. Through thought-provoking discussions, interviews, and analysis, we'll explore the various aspects of the broken system and seek to understand how it can be reformed.
We believe that by shining a light on these issues, we can empower our listeners to become advocates for change. We'll discuss potential solutions, highlight success stories, and provide resources for those who want to make a difference.
So whether you're a concerned citizen, a legal professional, or simply someone who wants to learn more about the flaws in our justice system, we invite you to join us on this journey. Together, let's challenge the broken system, amplify unheard voices, and work towards a more just and equitable future.
Get ready to explore the depths of our justice system like never before. This is the Broken System Podcast.
This content is not suitable for children, as it may contain material or themes that are intended for a mature audience. Additionally, it is important to emphasize that individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law, and judgments should be reserved until a fair and impartial legal process has taken place.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Broken System Podcast are entirely their own and do not necessarily represent the perspectives, opinions, or positions of the hosts or contributors.
Welcome to the Broken System Podcast, where we delve deep into the cracks and flaws of the justice system. I am Robert Palmer.
And I'm Lexi Kakis. In this week's episode, we shine a spotlight on the harrowing case of Tony Viola, a man wrongfully accused and convicted by a multi-jurisdictional mortgage fraud task force.
Tony's ordeal began with 3 indictments and 2 trials, all stemming from identical charges brought by the task force. Accused of orchestrating deceptive schemes to secure no money down mortgage loans, Tony found himself sentenced to 12 and a half years in prison. However, from behind bars and without legal representation, Tony uncovered crucial evidence that the Justice Department had withheld, ultimately leading to his exoneration in a second trial. His case exposed systemic issues within the prosecution's approach, potentially impacting the fates of many others ensnared by the task force operations.
Central to Tony's acquittal was Don Pacella, the office manager for the prosecutor's office, whose pivotal role in uncovering evidence proved to be instrumental. Dawn witnessed unthinkable misconduct, and her efforts shed light on the complexity of banks in approving dubious loans, challenging the government's narrative of mortgage fraud. Sadly, just before she was supposed to testify on Tony's behalf in his second trial, she was found dead in her apartment from an alleged alcohol overdose. Dawn's story is being covered on the Seeking Justice podcast, an investigative YouTube live series on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. EST, and also available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Tony's road to injustice was marred by misconduct and manipulation. Federal prosecutor Mark Bennett and state prosecutor Dan Caceres misrepresented facts and denied critical evidence under oath. Their actions not only contributed to Tony's wrongful conviction, but also raised serious questions about the integrity of the task force operations.
Arvin Clark, chair of the Mortgage Fraud Task Force, oversaw questionable activities, including undisclosed payments to informants and evidence manipulation. His controversial involvement, coupled with the suspicious circumstances surrounding Don Pacella's untimely death, underscores the lengths to which some may go to suppress the truth.
The case also unraveled personal entanglements, notably the romantic relationship between prosecutor Dan Caceres and government witness Catherine Clover, blurring the lines of objectivity in the prosecution.
Despite Tony Viola's acquittal, the fight for justice persists. Ongoing investigations into key figures, finances, and legal battles underscore the complexity and ongoing nature of his case. We encourage you to check out the evidence locker on Tony's website at www.freetonyviola.com for all documentation.
Join us as we dissect the layers of injustice in Tony's wrongful conviction and explore the relentless pursuit of truth and accountability. Welcome to this week's episode of the Broken System Podcast.
I guess we can start from the very beginning. Tony, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Okay, sure. Glad to do it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. My name is Tony Viola. I'm from a big Italian Catholic family in Cleveland, Ohio. Literally, grandparents that came over on a boat from Italy. Big, loving family. I was very fortunate. My younger brother and I, Chris, grew up. My dad was a great guy, very hardworking person. My mom's like the nicest person you ever could meet. And so, very happy childhood, all good things. I was very fortunate to go to college in Washington, D.C at Georgetown University and always dreamed of coming back here to Cleveland and starting a business. And that was what I dreamed of doing when I was younger. And my sort of college sweetheart, Katrina Rose, she was very creative. She was a very interesting person and she was a photographer. She loved the old houses and the architecture in Cleveland. Whenever it would rain, she'd be like, "Get ready." I'm like, "Get ready for what?" She's like, "We're going to go take pictures." And creative people or photographers probably know this, but the sun shines a certain way on pavement. It looks like a mirror and you can take pictures in the pavement of the building and all these different cool effects. So I was Trina's camera assistant for many years and had all kinds of cool pictures. So always registered in the real estate business. Gosh, these houses are all over town. Maybe we should buy one of them and fix it up. So there's an advantage of being 21 years old when you're in business because you don't think you need any money or you don't need to know anything. The old saying was ready, fire, aim. I think so. We just dived in and started a real estate business here in town. So that's a thumbnail sketch of my background in younger years.
And what year was that you started the business?
So that was, can you guys, we okay?
Yeah,
Oh,
we're good.
sorry,
Yeah,
it keeps going, dipping
it
in
was
and out
cutting
for a
in.
moment.
Yeah, it
So
was
that's
dipping there.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Yeah. Cause I just looked, my Wi-Fi looks okay. So this was in like the late 1980s and early 1990s, basically, that we actually just throw caution to the wind and start a real estate business. I graduated from college and I was actually going to school at night, business school at night. And so we literally just said, "Hey, let's go and start a business." And so we literally started with two credit cards in the basement of my house. The first thing we ever did was paint a lady's garage for $400. So we didn't exactly take the world by storm. Over time, you start a little business, and over time, we built it up. We made mistakes, we screwed up, but over time, we were able to attract a small core group and have a tiny office and just build from there.
That's
Awesome.
awesome. And that was in that era of the boom of housing was going up crazily at that point in time, or started to.
Actually, yeah. So the big like real estate boom was probably starting in the late 90s. And then, as you may remember, or people are probably too young to remember, but after 9/11, the government had this big keep America rolling, go shopping, basically, keep the economy strong. Interest rates were lowered. And so, for basically, if you go from, say, essentially 2001 to 2008, the rates kept being reduced and new lenders were coming into the market. So, there was a lending boom. People were making quite a lot of money. But when we started, it was very difficult to get financing, to get a loan. So we started out in a period which you had to put 20% down, you had to have really good credit. It was very difficult to get a loan. And then as our company grew, the lenders had become more and more lax. And what happened was, and this is crazy, but back in the day, you'd go to your local bank. They actually cared if you paid the money back because they loaned you their money. And just like if I was borrowing money from you, Lexi, you'd say, "Okay, I can loan you some money, but I sure want to get repaid." And then these lenders created these sort of on steroids, these mortgage origination machines that then sold the loans off in Wall Street and sliced and diced it. And so the people actually making the loans owned the loan for 1 second and then resold the loans. And so what was happening was there was a separation between the risk of loaning money and whoever actually ended up with the loan later. So there became a go-go period and it actually became a very treacherous time. And I remember in our company that we actually went and sought legal advice. We were real estate brokers, real estate agents like a Remax or a Keller Williams or SL Green brokers. But we were concerned about the way these banks were first throwing money around. And there was a lot of complaints about rates changing and adjustable loans that I wasn't told that the rate went up. In business, the old saying is there's two emotions. There's fear and greed. So greed is, my gosh, everyone else is getting rich. Why, how come I'm not getting rich? I don't want to miss out, FOMO, fear of missing out. And then there's also like fear, like I don't want to lose my life savings. I don't want to ruin my credit. I got to be careful. I don't want to lose my job and have no money. So in the real estate business, there's back and forth between FOMO, fear of missing out. Oh my gosh, Robert's getting rich. Why don't I own houses? I've seen him flip houses and make money. So we got, I don't want to lose out. And then, oh my gosh, I got to sell everything. I just want my money. I don't want to lose anything. So at various times, depending on how wild the lenders are, you get this either fear of missing out, this sort of greed thing, or, oh my gosh, don't want to do anything risky. I don't want to lose my credit or my down payment. So anyway, bottom line is yes, by the time this whole nightmare started that we're going to talk about, it was a lending boom and the lenders had been throwing money around pretty aggressively.
How big was your agency at that time? Your brokerage, how many people did you have working for you?
Okay, we literally started in the basement of my house with two credit cards. It was Trina and me. And then we started very slowly adding people. So if you fast forward 5 years, maybe we had 20 people. If you fast forward 10 years, maybe we had 50 people. By the time our company was raided and I was targeted for prosecution in state and federal court, we had well over 100 people, close to 150 folks in the company. Now, some of those were part-timers. We were a very open and an eclectic company. It was not corporate. We didn't have minimums where you had to do minimum transactions. We didn't charge any fees. We wanted folks to work for us and work with us. So we were very welcoming and we did have a lot of part-timers. But essentially, right before the day before this nonsense started with these prosecutors, if you came to the office the day before, you'd have seen a really dynamic corporate office, a lot of young people embracing technology, putting stuff online, virtual tours, videos of properties, apply online, upload your own listing if you want, discounted listing. You could just put your credit card in, Facebook, upload your own pictures of your house. So we were considered pretty dynamic and innovative. We had offices in Ohio and Florida. We had relationships we would get bank owned properties or foreclosed properties. And the way to make the phone ring is you have the cheapest house in any neighborhood, I don't care, or any community, your phone's going to ring. So we often had multiple clients that did business over and over with us. So a lot of brokerages sell someone a house and then 15 years later, they might move again. But we actually had investors and companies that were doing multiple transactions. We also leased and managed people. I was very fortunate. We had a great crew of people. There would have been no company if it wasn't for the folks that helped build it up. And, we had a really good organization with people that were innovative, creative, and we took the best from everyone. We had different perspectives and different ideas and different backgrounds, and it somehow meshed together well.
That's awesome. So you mentioned obviously before this whole nightmare kind of blew up. Why don't you take us up until that point? Like what was going on? Or why do you think, I guess I should say, why do you think you were targeted in this?
I didn't know at the time. I knew later, which I can answer the question later, but at the time, I had no idea. Our company was raided. We had FBI agents, we had helicopters and SWAT teams and police coming to our office with guns demanding that we immediately turn over all mortgage files. We had started a real estate brokerage business. Okay. So, real estate broker is a company that markets and sells properties. We show properties, we lease properties, we manage properties for others. We do not do financing. I was absolutely shocked and couldn't figure out why. But if you want me to fast forward a little bit, I was indicted in federal court and state court. I found out later that the prosecutor, the state prosecutor, was actually, and the federal prosecutor, a guy named Mark Bennett, and the state prosecutor, a guy named Dan Caceres, they started the case by going after a lady who had bought a myriad of rental properties from dozens of real estate firms. Her name was Catherine Clover, and she bought houses through our company and then many other companies as well. And she had partners that bought houses from other companies too. Anyway, she apparently couldn't rent a house and thought it would be a good idea to pay somebody to burn down a house. And an insurance company paid, and then when they audited the claim, they thought it was fishy, and they had contacted the ATF, and they started looking into it. And according to the ATF, this is all testimony you could read if you're bored. So the ATF agent said that a sure sign of potential mortgage fraud is when someone is acquiring a very large number of properties in a very short period of time, which this lady had done. So they said, this fire is fishy. You got all these properties, you got all these partners. We're going to look further. And the federal guy, Mark Bennett, was going to prosecute Clover for committing arson at this property. And then Dan Caceres, who has a fascinating history of rescuing the damsels in distress. Okay, so prosecutor Caceres comes in at a meeting, sees Catherine Clover's upset and in tears, and she's, I think, 25, 26 years old at this point, very attractive. And Dan Caceres says, just calm down. I can take care of this case. And so Caceres, he's been a prosecutor for 30 plus years, and this is over and over again the same stuff. He's going to rescue the damsel in distress. And so he takes, look, we're just going to go grab a coffee, relax, and says, look, I need somebody smart like you. I'm not in the real estate business, or I'm not intimately familiar with the real estate business. That was a lie, by the way, because his wife's a realtor and he's up to his eyeballs in the real estate business. But he tells Clover, look, I really could use someone like you. You've done all this investing. Maybe you could help me. So she wants to do something different with her life. He agrees to send her to law school. They started a romantic affair almost immediately. She's going to law school and she's, quote, helping the government with these cases. So Caceres says, we always go for the bigger fish. We start small. Don't worry, Catherine, you're just a small fish. We're going to go to a bigger fish. Oh, you bought properties through Tony's company. Oh, I've heard of that guy. They have a lot of employees. They have an office downtown. That would be a juicy target. So in fine prosecutorial fashion, the person who actually committed the crime is not prosecuted. And then we start going after other people. So, of course, when this thing started, I had no idea about any of that. I only found that out much later. So initially, I was in an absolute state of shock that the FBI is in our office with guns. It was awful. I just remember putting my head in my hands thinking that my life is completely, or my reputation has been completely destroyed. And however this matter ends, what a disaster, because I just felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had all these really talented colleagues that I just loved working with. And I thought, my gosh, they all have car payments and rent and children. And what in the heck are we going to do? And so it was really an awful time. I was very afraid. I've never had any interaction with law enforcement. We had a really good real estate lawyer, a really good accountant. I never thought we were doing anything wrong. And I thought I had taken all these steps to make sure that we were in compliance. We also passed all of our audits. You get audited when you're a broker. We had trust accounts. We were collecting funds for other people if we managed properties. Never any red flags. So when this whole thing started, I was, and it was like getting hit by a Mack truck, just getting run over by a truck on the freeway or something. It was just absolutely out of nowhere and absolutely shocking.
Yeah. Robert, did you have a question?
So when I know you probably hindsight now, when you found out that they were looking at you, how many other brokers were they looking at the same time? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's what happened. They had set up a mortgage fraud task force. So when this case started being investigated, this is already 2008, and the financial crisis was underway and the economy had tanked, and these subprime lenders had already gotten out of the business. Now, we thought that we were well positioned for a downturn, not that we wanted it, but look, we're in Cleveland, Ohio. This is not exactly Silicon Valley. And so we always kept our costs low. We were always scrappy. So even though we got larger, we still never really had any corporate overhead. I never borrowed any money. The company was a lean and mean operation. So we were built for a downturn, if you will. So again, not that we wanted anything bad to happen to the economy, but we're just a little company. So we can't wave our magic wand and make the economy good or bad. We just have to compete within the confines of how it actually is, not what we'd like. So thought we were positioned well for this thing. But the answer is, this task force was set up. Supposedly, the Ohio Organized Crime Commission said, we're looking at these lenders. And there had been investigations of some of these lenders. There's a company called Argent Mortgage that was found by the Ohio Civil Rights Commission to systematically be charging people of color higher rates of interest than they were charging similarly situated other borrowers. And the Attorney General's office had also disallowed or shut down New Century's ability to operate in the state. That was one of these lenders. So I thought that this mortgage fraud task force was going after some of these lenders. We were getting complaints from customers that said, hey, I thought my rate was this, and it's actually different. And they slipped in different papers at the closing, and I would not have bought the house because now I'm losing money. No one's ever called me and said, I want to lose money on rental property. So we were aware that there was challenges and problems, and we tried to put all these restrictions in. So when it first happened, I thought, well, maybe there'll be some accountability for what these crazy lenders were doing. And then quickly, in the case against me, those entities that were charging people of color more money were the victims. Like, I tricked them into making the loans. So what you had here, and it was clear from the beginning, the government was sometimes going after banks and then sometimes portraying them as innocent victims. The poor innocent bank had no idea, except this criminal Tony duped them into making these loans. So right from the beginning, I was absolutely shocked. I'm like, this is unbelievable. That was just what they said was going on did not comport with the reality in the business. And people in the business, in the real estate business, I'm not about mortgages, I'm talking about real estate. My colleagues, so folks that worked in our office and other brokers, they were like, Tony, why are they going after you for mortgages? And I said, I don't know. And if you could figure out how to explain this to my mother, I would really appreciate it because I have no idea how I'm supposedly secretly owning mortgage companies that I don't own. And they also said I stole $46 million. It's the nation's largest mortgage fraud case, but I never did mortgages and I didn't own the companies that were listed in the indictment. The government, Mark Bennett, this federal prosecutor, who has a very healthy opinion of himself, by the way, he's been subsequently fired and disbarred, very healthy opinion of himself, is so stupid that he didn't even know what businesses I owned. Very excited to go on television and have press conferences with his buddy Dan Caceres, but they never even were how. And that was one of the things that, and it ticked them off to no end. But I refused to say no comment and I refused to plead guilty. And I kept saying, I show the reporters, I'm like, look at this indictment. I don't own transcontinental lending. I don't own family title. How does the government not know what businesses I own? And initially, and I naively thought that it would all work out, which was a big mistake. We need to teach wrongful convictions and how law enforcement actually act to third graders so people know that once they come after you, it doesn't matter what happens. They can watch a video of what actually happened. They'll never veer from their initial theory of the case. But I had hoped that this would work out. And I thought, wait, I hired an attorney. I said, we have to go down there. We have to bring my tax returns. We can show what companies I actually own. I wanted my real estate attorney to meet with the prosecutors. I wanted to waive all privileges, just my accountant. We're going to, absolutely not. I'm a target. They don't do that. And so they were never willing to even entertain, forget fraud. I'm just talking about basic facts. I don't own transcontinental lending. I don't own family title services. This is just a basic fact. I never got money from them. And Transcontinental Lending was a national company, and our real estate brokerage firm had helped them find locations. That's different than owning a company. It's like if I find a McDonald's or a Taco Bell, hey, you could build a building here. I don't own it. Okay. So, and I don't run it. And if there's something going on wrong, it's am I responsible for life? So anyway, there was a basic lack of understanding of, first of all, what a realtor does, and then the difference between a realtor and a loan officer. But once the feds come after you, particularly with the media circus, because you got to remember, they really locked themselves into this narrative. They loved publicity. They couldn't get enough of it. And they had press conferences, there's press releases. Some of it's on my website, freetonyviola.com. You can go to the press tab if you want to watch Mark Bennett. They loved it. And they would I would see them chasing reporters, try to talk to them. And we'd have these endless pre-trials, and Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres, they'd always be holding court, giving the latest tidbits to journalists. They would let the journalists think, hey, I can't really fill you in too much. Just let me give you a few. They just would keep these people on the hook. And this was just an unbelievable situation. But the long answer to your short question is they're going after lots of people. And I was just absolutely shocked that they were coming after me because I never had anything to do with the mortgage business.
And it sounds to me like that they put their foot in their mouth, but they couldn't take it back out. So they just kept pushing it, saying, we're going to be the big dog. We're going to make our narrative work no matter what we have to do to make the narrative work.
That's exactly right, Robert. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the theme of this entire thing. And you may have heard the old saying, the first rule of holes is to stop digging. These guys never stop digging. They locked themselves into an incorrect narrative. They uncorked a media circus, federal court, state court. They're never willing to admit they're wrong, ever. Federal prosecutors, FBI, Dan Caceres, you can forget about it. They would shoot themselves before they would admit a mistake. They're never willing to do it. They think it's a sign of weakness. Of course, I didn't understand that because in the business world, business is very humbling. You buy the wrong stock, you buy the wrong apartment building, you admit mistakes all the time. In sports, if the third baseman's no good, we're going to get but these guys just dig in. They never veer off their initial theory, and particularly because they targeted me. Now, maybe if I went to a bar and got into a fight or something, maybe that would be different. But when they come after you and target you, you're exactly right. We start with a conclusion. Tony's a criminal. We work backwards from there. We backfill. We're looking for stuff to backfill our theory of the case. Exculpatory evidence was absolutely discarded, suppressed. Witnesses went to Mark Bennett, Dan Caceres, and said, look, I've worked for this guy for 10 years, 15 years. He's an honest guy, nerd, might not be the coolest guy you ever met in your life, but he's not a criminal. He doesn't rip anybody off. I wouldn't work for my employees, or colleagues, really. They would tell people, look, if the guy was a criminal, first of all, there's lots of realtors. Okay. I'm not the only guy. Yeah, I'm stealing money and I stole $46 million, but you have to nobody would work with us if we were criminals. The customers wouldn't. My colleagues would have gone somewhere else. Every one of them was extremely talented. They would be hired like that by another broker. They were always being recruited constantly. They were constantly being recruited by other companies. So they would go down and say this stuff. And Mark Bennett would say, wrong answer. You can't say that. Don't ever say Tony's innocent. We'll indict you. We'll come after you. So there was an absolute refusal to listen to what people were saying that were in a position to know, hey, I've worked for this guy for 10 years or whatever. So they didn't want to hear anything like that. The other thing, too, which was ridiculous, was I supposedly stole $46 million from JP Morgan
That's what
Chase.
I was about to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, I supposedly stole $46 million. First of all, the bond was zero. Sign here and you can go home. Okay. And let me tell you something else about Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres, these knuckleheaded prosecutors. They never did anything to shut my real estate company down. So let's say I was a crook. Okay. And I was stealing money. And let's say Lexi happened not to watch the news that day or something. Okay. Or wasn't like on Google. And I would have ripped her off 2 weeks later. So why would you say that the company could continue to operate if we were stealing money and we crashed the economy? They said, if you see Tony Viola at a Starbucks with his briefcase and a muffin, that is not breakfast. That is a crime scene. Okay. First of all, if you call a realtor, what do you think is going to happen? We're going to say, let's meet. Hey, I want to buy a house. Great. Let's get together. We'll talk about, or I'm looking for an apartment. Oh, great. Or I'm looking to lease space for my company. Fantastic. When can we get together? What do you have in mind? Let me bring you some options, some possibilities. So the government thinks this is some evil conspiracy because we're selling real estate. So the whole thing was unbelievable. And these lenders never took any steps. Fast forward to my second trial, I had them on the stand. And I said, did you call the police? No. Are you the victim of a mortgage fraud case? No. Did I steal money from your company? No. Did you ever send a memo not to do business with Tony? He just stole $46 million. No, we didn't. So the whole thing was ridiculous. The government was saying entities were victims. And by the way, JP Morgan Chase is big enough to take care of themselves. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I scammed some little old lady who was demented or something and I took all her money. These banks would have sued me. They all say they took no steps. Did you call the police? No. Did you fill out a police report? No. Did you call the Better Business Bureau? No. Did you write a letter asking for the money back? No. Did you send a letter? Don't do business with this Tony guy. He just stole $46 million. No. And there was no bond. So the whole thing was farcical, except I ended up a decade in jail. It's not, these people are incredibly powerful and they're completely unaccountable. So anyway, they would just absolutely suppress evidence. And of course, I was getting wind of this as the case was unfolding. And I was just shocked that there was absolutely no interest in letting my real estate attorney go downtown. They said our paperwork was fraudulent. The lawyer wrote it. Where did the lawyer get it? From the government website, from the HUD website, standard templates, or from the Realtor Board. This is a vast conspiracy, involves every realtor in America. The Realtor Board has standard form contracts and our lawyer would review them. So anyway, the eagerness to put me in jail is unbelievable. And even when it was clear that there was no apparent losses, even in my PSI, my pre-sentence investigation report to determine the length of the sentence, the main lender that I supposedly scammed, this division of Citigroup, they said, we didn't lose any money. Mark Bennett said, you intended to cause all these losses. But the actual supposed victim told the government that they did not want restitution and they did not lose money. So this just shows you how ridiculous this is, because let me tell you what's supposed to happen in America. First, there's a crime. My God, someone's been shot. Let's call the police. And then we figure out what happened. Here, the government was alleging a crime when there was none. The victims never reported any crime. Nobody complained of any criminal activity. And in fact, the only criminal activity that went on in my case was inside the prosecutor's office. And we can get into that if you want. But to quote,
Hmm.
win the case, or for Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres to not have to dismiss the case or admit that they were wrong, they took extraordinary measures and committed just an unbelievable amount of misconduct. And then, of course, they take it, law enforcement is this fascinating. They take it personally. So I didn't want to plead guilty. Oh, you're upsetting the prosecutor. Are you guys kidding me? So it's so funny how they're so prickly. They're supposed to be tough guys. What do you tough? What do you mean you're upset? The lawyer was like, you can't go on the media and talk about it. But they were having press conferences. They stood in front of some house that went into foreclosure and blamed me for it, even though we had nothing to do with it. They put my name in all these press releases. Nation's largest mortgage fraud case. The FBI went to the customers and told them, you better stop doing business with this guy. But when I tried to speak up, oh, no, you can't. You're upsetting the prosecutor. So really, if you ever read Franz Kafka, The Trial, that's what
Hmm.
this is. It's Kafka-esque, where in that book, which is brilliant, the guy says, I don't think I did anything wrong. Aha, he must be guilty because he's pleading his innocence. Only a guilty man would do that. And in my case, as it went forward and there was no evidence that I did anything wrong, the prosecutors were convinced this guy's a well-insulated conspirator. He's taken extraordinary steps, and we are not going to let this slick Tony guy get away. So as the case proceeded, the computers that were seized in televised raids, poof, we don't have those anymore. The government started making all these misrepresentations. They started shifting evidence back between federal court and state court, and this task force had a different location. It became very expensive to have lawyers trying to track this stuff down. They're supposedly supposed to give it to you before trial. They did not do it. And so anyway, this starting with a conclusion nonsense and having press conferences is a very frightening thing, because there's nobody in the prosecutor's office who was ever willing to say, wait a minute, this guy really doesn't own the companies. And I asked at the second trial, I asked this detective, this guy named Arvin Clark, I said, Arvin, did you remember me going on TV saying you guys were too stupid to have a job in law enforcement and that you should buy a Quiznos franchise? I don't know if you guys have that, or Jersey Mike subs or
We
something.
do.
Okay, good. You guys should be making sub sandwiches. You could toast the bun, okay, and make sub sandwiches. How can you be this stupid to be a detective and you don't even know what businesses I own? And I actually had my laptop hooked up, and I said, let's go to the Ohio Secretary of State's office. Let's see let's see who owns what company. And it was like a 30-second thing. And I said, how stupid are you? And I asked him, didn't you see me on TV? He said, yeah. We don't adjust what we're doing based on what someone says on
On
television.
facts.
Right, based on facts. We don't adjust. So maybe you need to change your policy and let me hook you up with a sub sandwich, because you guys could make sub sandwiches. You would be good at it, Arvin, because you're not good at policing, because you guys don't even know what businesses I own. And you had all these press conferences and you told the public that I stole $46 million through my nefarious activities at Transcontinental Lending and Family Title Services. And I wasn't involved. I didn't do mortgages. I didn't get money from these transactions.
Wow.
Did they ever try to say where you put the money?
It's so funny that you asked that. That is a great question. I was so interested in, where is this $46 million? And my friends had a field day with it. They were like, Tony, you made us pay half the pizza at Monday Night Football. Yeah, and you have $46 million, or that's the gift you got your mother for Mother's Day when you have $46 million. So I was asking, where is this $46 million? The federal conspiracy rules are unbelievable. You can not know you're in a conspiracy. You could further the conspiracy without knowing the other people. You could do legal things that are still part of an illegal scheme. The answer is they never answered the question. But at the second trial, I subpoenaed my probation officer, or the PSI lady, this lady named Julie Wessel, who supposedly prepared all this. Now, this is just the most evil, these bureaucrats. It's a dictatorship by bureaucrats. So Julie Wessel was calling my family and friends, does Tony have any money hidden or whatever, which upset everybody. So I wanted her to be a witness in court. And I wanted the FBI to be Jeff Kassouf, because there was all this misconduct. By the second trial, there was all these documents that I had that supposedly didn't exist. And of course, at the second trial, we destroyed the government's case with their own documents. Nothing that I had. It was all their own stuff. So I asked Ms. Wessel, I was very excited to ask her, where is this $46 million? She asserted this thing called TUI, the TUI rule, about dual sovereignty, that the federal people don't have to appear at a state proceeding, and that it would disrupt the public order of the country, the fair administration of the public order, or some nonsense, if she came to court to testify. So I never got the answer to where is this $46 million. It's a great question. And the bond was zero, and they never even took any steps to shut the business down, which was crazy. Anyway, The
As
answer is
part
I don't know where the $46 million is, but I don't have it.
as part of your first sentence, did they put restitution as part of
Absolutely.
your first $46
Absolutely.
million dollars?
Absolutely. What they did was they gave me, well, first it was $1.1 million of restitution. And there's a rule that says if the case is complicated and it's difficult to identify the victims, the government has up to 90 days to amend the restitution. Okay. So I was convicted, sentenced, and you owe $1,000,001. Okay. Based on foreclosures. These houses were in your indictment. They went into foreclosure. Later, a year and a half later, Mark Bennett changes it to $3 million, even though there's only supposed to have 90 days and you're supposed to have a hearing and be able to contest it. But the rules do not apply to federal officials. They just do whatever they want. So even though the law says 90 days, they don't care. So then I get this thing in the jail that now I owe $3 million of restitution. Now, a very interesting point on restitution. This is a money laundering scheme run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I'm jointly and severally liable for restitution with a myriad of other co-defendants. The government is not tracking payments that other people have made. These lenders that are supposedly innocent victims, some of their employees were prosecuted on the exact same transactions in my case, and they paid restitution. That's never been credited to our restitution balance. We've got state cases and federal cases, and on the same transaction, same victims. So restitution is designed to make the victim whole. So if I break into Lexi's place and I steal $2,000 and I'm prosecuted, she would be entitled to $2,000 to put her back into the situation she was in prior to the offense. Okay. Restitution does not permit the victim to gain a windfall or more money. So let's say I steal money with someone else drove the getaway car. If he's ordered to pay and I'm ordered to pay, whenever Lexi gets the $2,000, we're done.
Yep.
Okay, because
Mhm.
she's been made whole. But the government is not tracking who's doing what. Nobody knows where all this money is, and so the whistleblower that helped me in my case, Dawn Pasella, she has a friend that's still in the prosecutor's office, and so she mailed me the ledger of what they're actually doing with the money. What are they doing with the money? Because the victim said they didn't want the money. Remember, Argent and these. Oh, we
Mhm.
didn't lose any money. We're not requesting restitution. What are we doing with it? $20 million has been collected. Hotel rooms, laptop computers, U.S. Air, so plane tickets and flights. Cass Dan, which I assume is Dan Caceres. So that's good. The prosecutor that prosecuted me is getting money from the restitution that's supposed to go to the victims fund. It's really a prosecution for profit scheme, and it's been raised in court, and the federal judiciary doesn't want to hear it. They're there to protect prosecutors. Federal court has nothing to do with law in a criminal matter. They just love the FBI, love the Justice Department. They all used to work there. So our judiciary, even though they might look different, oh, this is a person of color, this is a woman, this is a man, they're all prosecutors. They're all prosecutors. And
Mhm.
so they don't want to get into this restitution mess. So we'll see if we get anywhere with it. It's been raised repeatedly and ignored. So we're in the ridiculous position, by the way, Kafka-esque, of arguing to judges that they should be enforcing their orders because they ordered certain people to pay money to victims and the government is not following the court order. They are not properly distributing restitution to crime victims funds, and the prosecutor's office doesn't have discretion to divert crime victims funds and say, wow, we're just going to use it to buy airline tickets. But that's actually what they're doing per this ledger that's been posted on my website. So the restitution thing is a crazy situation, but it essentially emanates from two things. One, the invincibility of these people. They do whatever they want, and they don't even take any steps to hide it. But also the fact that there really were no victims, because the thing is, if I stole money from the Broken System podcast, if I was your accountant or something and I stole money and I was prosecuted and the money was collected, I guarantee you, Robert, that you would pick up the phone and call the prosecutor's office and say, hey, thanks
Where's
for
my
putting
money?
that. Yeah, thanks for putting that Tony guy away. He stole money from us. Can I come down there and grab a check, or you guys mail it? Like, how do I
Mhm.
get my money that this guy stole? So the notion that there's $20 million, nobody cares about, none of the supposed victims are even interested in getting it, and that the government can do whatever they want, that is not what they told the public. That's not what the indictments say, and that's not what the judgment in criminal cases say. They all have restitution. Lastly, there's people in a conspiracy that pled guilty to the exact same thing that have different restitution amounts. There's joint and several liability for some people. If they want to hammer you, they would play games with different restitution amounts. I've got a co-defendant who has a $3,000 restitution. I got $3 million. So they do whatever they want. The restitution laws have not been followed in any of these mortgage fraud cases. And as of now, no judge has expressed the slightest bit of curiosity as to why $20 million is missing. And incidentally, the federal government, it's called the Bureau of Justice Assistance, they funded this task force. So this is taxpayer money. So the government is stealing money from indigent prisoners on behalf of the public, and the public is funding it. The Bureau of Justice Assistance funded the task force, as did the state of Ohio Attorney General's Office Organized Crime Commission. So they sent a pot of money, let's set up a task force, and then they've been collecting money for victims that they're not sending to victims. And so far, nobody cares, but I hope that changes.
I think it
Yeah.
has to. I think if you make enough noise, eventually somebody's going to say that. It gets so sticky because I find it funny that the lady threw TUI at you, even though it was a federally prosecuted and state prosecuted case, how she could use that to get out of telling you where the money supposedly was when you were prosecuted by both.
Right. But see, what you got to remember is, again, so when Mark Bennett or Dan Caceres, the federal and state prosecutor, when it suited their interest to say, hey, we're jointly working together through a task force, they would do that. They would have joint press conferences. The state guy becomes a special AUSA. The FBI agents staffed the task force. So when they felt like it, or when it suited their interests, they were working together jointly.
Mhm.
But when it was their interest to be dual sovereigns, oh, that's separate. That's state. We're feds. That we don't have anything to do with that. Call them. We gave you all the evidence we were supposed to. I've had to sue 19 government agencies because somehow they didn't give me the evidence because I won a second trial. But it's no one's fault. It's the perfect bureaucratic mechanism. This task force, it's just like nailing Jello to the wall. Oh, shucks, Tony, I'm really sorry. You get the friendly bureaucrat. Gee, we gave you what we were supposed to. I'm sorry this happened to you. It's not our fault. So go down the hall and ask that other agency. So yes, you're exactly right. And the other thing, even the judges would throw their arms up in the air and say, gee, I can't. The state judge, Judge Daniel Gall, he would say, well, I can't order the federal people to give, and it's the federal judge. So there's important issues of federalism here, and we can't just go into state court. So they would play that dual sovereignty. You're a citizen of Ohio, you're a citizen of the United States. They'd play that game when it suited their interest. Now the federal government is saying the state trial has nothing to do with the federal conviction, even though it was identical, and they participated in the second trial. Mark Bennett was there, the FBI, they were there trying to get me convicted again. And now they say it doesn't mean anything. Why did you do it? It was only 2 months. Why did you put somebody on trial for 2 months if it doesn't really matter? So they just say whatever is convenient for them.
Mhm.
Collectively, over time, you literally can have a piece of paper, and on one side you can put what Mark Bennett said, one on here, and then he said the opposite thing here. So what's the word? The exigency of the moment or something. They will say whatever they have to say. So Mark Bennett
Mhm.
lies and says, oh, Tony signed a conflict of interest waiver to allow these lawyers represent all these people. It's not true. I never signed that, but it defeated my appellate brief because I was arguing there was a conflict of interest in my case. So what is interesting about law enforcement is they'll say anything at a given moment, but if you actually keep them in court long enough, they'll actually say the exact opposite thing in a myriad of different examples. So your state federal thing, your TUI, is exactly correct. They use it when it's convenient. Otherwise, we're honored to be working together, and we're sharing resources, and we're deconflicting, meaning the informant in this case is the informant over there, and the promises of leniency over here carry over there. So when they feel like it, yeah, we're a joint task force working together,
No,
prosecuting
that's
jointly.
100. It's 100% that they are using the joint task force to intimidate people into pleading guilty because it was too hard to fight both
Correct.
and get away. So they would intimidate them into pleading guilty, getting that $3,000 of restitution when
Right.
they're holding you, who's fighting it, for the
Right.
$3 million in restitution. It's sad that they did that.
It's a
Yeah.
grave abuse of power to people that didn't think they were doing anything wrong. If you call me up and you say, hey, Tony, you know what? I'd really like to sell heroin to high school students. We know that's wrong. All right. Or you say, hey, let's go rob some gas stations. Okay. We know that's wrong. What did we do? What was our crime? We were realtors. We were using paperwork our lawyer wrote. We really didn't think we were leading a life of crime. And so we didn't think we were doing anything wrong. And so people that by and large were prosecuted had no criminal records, didn't have a lot of resources. We weren't like rich zillionaires. So it was very difficult to fight the case. But you're exactly right. This task force was just a bullying mechanism. The other thing that was fascinating too is the task force was actually used as a witness screening mechanism. So what Mark Bennett would do, the federal prosecutor, he would have the state people pre-screened. So this guy Arvin Clark who hired Dawn Pasella, by the way, and he was the head of the task force. His nominal job was first he was a Cleveland police officer, and then he was a person that was called Ohio BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. So he was a state detective. So he would go to somebody, Sarah Swartz, who was one of my colleagues, a brilliant lady, just fantastic. And she really helped us build the company. So he would go to her and say, Sarah, listen, I need to talk to you about this case. And she said, you guys, this is crazy. And of course, they threatened Sarah like they threaten everybody. We're going to take your kids. And Sarah's tough. So she said, look, they're a pain in the neck. You can have them. Okay. You can pick them up at 5. So she was hilarious. She's like, look, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you threaten me with. Tony's innocent. I will testify. You guys should be ashamed of yourself for what you're doing. We are realtors. We don't do mortgages. And you guys should throw the case out. I basically told this guy to pound salt. And so law enforcement's a one-trick pony. We're going to threaten you, your wife, your children, the dog, your grandmother, or that's really what they do. It's just, in my case anyway, it's just constant threats. Mark Bennett, we're going to put your kids in foster care. We're going to indict your wife. We're going to give you 30 years in jail. Just constant threats. Sarah told them to jump in the lake. So Mark Bennett never interviewed her, or the FBI never interviewed her, because she said I was innocent. So they don't want to have to take the risk of turning that over. And so maybe Mark Bennett certainly wouldn't turn over evidence that's exculpatory, but maybe there is an honest person in there, or maybe it gets into some pile of papers that some person who doesn't really know the case just turns it over. Oh, this says Tony's name on it. We'll turn it over. So to prevent the actual law enforcement officials from taking notes in a meeting, they used Arvin Clark to screen the witnesses. I had at the second trial, I think 26 witnesses or something. They're all up there for 10 minutes. But I think half of them said, yeah, we told the prosecutor you were innocent. Who'd you tell? Arvin Clark. I told the state. Did you ever meet with Mr. Bennett? No. Did you ever meet with the FBI? No. So there was a witness screening. So all these people saying I'm innocent. And then the federal government says, well, gee, we didn't know. We never had that. We didn't know. So it's not a Brady violation because we didn't know that Sarah Swartz said that you were innocent because we never interviewed this lady. The other thing is Caceres himself. So he's a prosecutor. So what's the role of a prosecutor is to present the government's case in court. He's an attorney. Prosecutor's not an investigator, right? So detective's an investigator, an FBI agent's an investigator. Caceres, he doesn't want to run the risk of some honest guy writing a report or somehow getting it to me. So he used to jump in the car himself and go interview witnesses. This is not what a prosecutor is supposed to do. And so the prosecutors were veering into these investigative roles because the case was nonsense. And in order to keep this house of cards up, they really had to take a lot of time and effort to make sure, because I had been in business for quite some time. By the time this case started, we were at the same place in downtown Cleveland. We had colleagues, people knew us, and there was quite a lot of people that we had interacted with, customers and so forth. So anyway, it's unbelievable what's gone on in this case.
Now, how many charges were you facing for both of your trials?
Yeah, so in federal court, I had 36 counts. And they charged me with something called 404B, which is other acts. And you could be sentenced on other acts, but it wasn't in the indictment. My God, you sold no money down houses other times, not just in this indictment. And we're going to use it to show that it's not a mistake and you're this criminal. So I was 36 counts and then what's called 404B, other acts. And in the state case, I was charged with 59 counts, which encompassed these 404B acts. And I was charged as a racketeer. So I'm like a mobster. Selling the house is fraud. And then if we get a commission, that's theft. And then if we deposit it in the bank, that's money laundering. And then if we pay the sales team member that sold the house, that's conversion. The whole thing was theft by deception or wire fraud in the federal case because we tricked the poor innocent bank into making no money down mortgage loans that they didn't allow. That was the whole thing. So these charges were unbelievable. In the federal case, there was 2 counts of conspiracy in there. And so I'm facing literally hundreds of years. And the alleged amount of the financial losses were so great. And that in both state and federal court, the amount of the losses impact your sentence. So if I steal $100, that's less of a sentence than if I steal 1,000 versus 1,000,000 versus 50 million. So since I supposedly stole $46 million, nobody knows where that is. I supposedly stole $46 million. The sentence length was very long. Now, of course, if you're an informant, you get the slap on the wrist and they don't enforce that. But if they want to hammer you, there's really no bounds to what's called prosecutorial discretion. There's really no boundary. You can do whatever they want. You could have 2 people on the same case. One guy gets 30 days in jail. One guy gets 85 years. Literally, the laws are elastic and so vague. You can charge anybody with stuff. And then you can have widely disparate sentences, but the prosecutor's allowed to do what's called a Rule 35, meaning a downward departure. Yeah, the guidelines say that, but this person helped us. So we don't want to actually put them in jail. So Catherine Clover is my co-defendant. She's supposedly involved in this $1 million heist. And she got, I think, like 4 months of house arrest or something because she was this helpful informant to the government, even though she'd actually burned the house down. Incidentally, she was testifying in all kinds of cases. Nobody ever bothered to disclose that the government sent her to law school for free. That's consideration to a government witness. That's what's called a Giglio violation, because the attorneys were never told that the government was basically making her a paralegal inside the prosecutor's office. She's supposed to be a fact witness. And so the Giglio violation means that an attorney would be able to cross-examine that government witness. And you're getting paid, you'd say anything, wouldn't you? And of course, they also didn't bother to tell us that Dan Caceres was having an affair with her. The federal guy knows this. He even puts in writing that she commits perjury at my trial, never withdraws the testimony. You're supposed to withdraw false testimony when you know that it's false. It's called a NAPU violation. There's just piles of instances of just crystal clear government wrongdoing and absolute violations of the law, which have just been ignored in this case. So the reason I mentioned the Giglio thing is because jurors may say, you know what, a jury can believe all, some, or none of a witness's testimony. And they could go back in the jury box and say, you know what, I don't care what she said. She's got paid. We're not going to count that as evidence. Now, maybe there's other evidence against Tony. Let's see what else we got. But let's set that aside. They could do that. They don't have to do that, but they could. But of course, the government never told us about this relationship between the prosecutor and this witness, the romantic relationship, or the consideration to send her to law school and have her as a paralegal inside the prosecutor's office. Properly cross-examined, a skilled lawyer would say, listen, you got to set that nonsense aside. That's not helpful. And of course, if we knew she was sleeping with the prosecutor, we would have filed a motion to dismiss the case and alleged some type of vindictive or selective prosecution to protect the prosecutor's girlfriend, essentially. But of course, they suppressed that, and we did not know that at the time.
So going into your trial, how did you feel about your odds or chances going into your trial?
The first one or the second one?
The first one.
Okay. The government claims, Mark Bennett says, fiddlesticks, we lost all the computers in your case. And that caused almost an 18-month delay right there in the case. And then the federal judge kept saying it was a complicated case. I wanted a speedy trial, and they said, no, it's too complicated. And it was complicated because the government was hiding evidence, is why it was complicated. So the government did a brilliant job of just draining me financially. My company is dying over many years now. The lawyers are charging money to go to all these hearings. We got state and federal court. So even if I would have, let's just say I would have, quote, won the first trial, which was almost 2 months, I think. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. My business was ruined. My reputation was ruined. I was exhausted. I was broke. Could I have gone and sat on a beach for 6 weeks and tried to reinvent myself or something? I guess. But I remember I had a second trial coming up. So I guess I wanted to think this would work out. I just never really realized how vicious these prosecutors were and how much criminal activity inside the U.S. Attorney's Office is kosher in there. I just never really realized it. It's very scary to think of it. So I just hoped against hope that it would somehow work out. It was awful. I just was exhausted. I was totally drained, but I was just hopeful that I knew I didn't do mortgages and I didn't defraud anybody. I never told anybody to lie on their loans. So I was just cautiously optimistic or naively thinking that maybe there's a chance that this will work out because this is absolutely ridiculous. Incidentally, the lawyer that I had, this guy named Jay Milano, was just absolutely the worst lawyer ever. If anybody in the greater Cleveland area would like to go to jail for a really long time and pay lots of money, this is your man. He went behind my back and signed a joint defense agreement with other attorneys. I'd never signed it. And he agreed not to put on certain witnesses that were adverse to the co-defendants. I never agreed to this. Mark Bennett has been lying for 12 years and said I signed off on it, and the judge held a hearing and I signed a waiver. This is completely false. So I did not know that. I thought I would testify. Then he ended up saying I wasn't going to testify. I did not know that I was supposed to jump up and down and tell the judge, no, I must go on the stand. I just, at that time, I believed in the lawyer. Let me tell you about Jay Milano. If you have money, you're better off to just flush it down the toilet. Just go to the bank, get cash, and just flush it down the toilet, because then you don't expect anything. But I gave the guy money hoping, he drained my life savings, hoping that he would actually be prepared. He charged me $15,000 for an investigation and never paid the investigator, and showed up at trial without any investigative materials or any witness summaries of who we were going to put on. He lied and told me we were going to put all these witnesses on. I not only was getting hammered by the United States of America, and that does mean that United States versus Tony, you can rest assured that the
That's
government
heavy.
will use every ounce of its
Oh,
power to
absolutely.
smash you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they will destroy you. And but then I got this lawyer that didn't do anything either. But I, at the beginning of the trial, I hoped against hope that maybe this will somehow work out. I just had this sliver of faith in our system or in the country that this would work out. But that was dangerous. I wish I didn't have that. I wish I knew how to act, because I would have done things so much differently had I known the viciousness of these people and the absolute unwillingness to ever do the right thing ever. They just don't do it. It's
Mhm.
us against the world in law enforcement. They just don't follow the rules and follow the law. We have so many so much wrongdoing with these NAPU violations and Brady violations and Giglio violations, and really this double jeopardy nonsense with using this task force. It was really a unified prosecution in different venues and using the task force as a witness screening, and the affair with Catherine Clover. And we haven't even gotten to the Dawn Pasella stuff.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I think this is a perfect opportunity to
Yep.
mention her. So when does she come into play in your story?
Pretty early on, really, because our company is raided. I stole $46 million. I'm indicted in federal court and state court. And I've always had really good friends in my life. And the old joke was Trina was very cool. Okay. Trina was very hip, and she always knew the new restaurants and the music scene. Oh, this band is really good. We got to go. And I knew none of these things. So the joke was that even though I'm not cool, I had really cool friends. And that so that you could actually meet cool people by hanging out with Tony, even though Tony himself is not cool. So I had these great friends, and they thought this was very wrong. They were really deeply upset that was being prosecuted for stealing millions of dollars. It was ridiculous. I lived in the same house forever. I drove an old car. I was just not a $46 million kind of guy. Anyway, there was no yacht. There's no plane. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, for God's sake. Anyway, if I had 40, I love Cleveland. It's my hometown. If I had $46 million, with all due respect to the city, I would not be here. If anyone's been here in the winter, they know what I'm saying. Okay, so one of my friends said, and I had these great ladies in our office, Annie Macklis and Sarah Brewer and Abby Meyer, and just a myriad of really good people and some really good friends. And so they said, look, we're going to set up these little happy hours, Tony. Let's just have happy hours. I told everybody I wasn't pleading guilty. There was great interest in the case. People wanted to know, what's the latest? Did you talk to the lawyer? Is there a hearing? Where are these missing computers? It was on the news constantly. So there was just a curiosity of what's going on. I had customers that said, look, we're going to hang in with you, but if you're going to plead guilty, you got to let us know so we can make arrangements. We'll hang in with you. So the joke was, it was a third of a pity party, and it was a third of an informational gathering, exchange, a sharing session, and a third of a fundraiser. We would sell these little tickets, or my friends donated little prizes, and maybe we raised a couple $1,000 or something. It was really mostly just to get together and have a slice of pizza like we used to. And it was to show support. So at one of these, the first one, really, I think it was the first one. One of my friends is there. It might have been the second one, actually. I'm sorry. It was actually the second one of these. We had about 7 or 8 of these. The second one, one of my friends, Dennis Spagnola, was talking to this young lady, and he had said to me, Tony, this lady wants to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, of course, sure. And that was Dawn. That's how I first met Dawn. She said, look, my name is Dawn, and I'm working with these local defense attorneys on similar cases. These mortgage fraud cases are all nothing but a bunch of BS. And I'd love to talk to you about your case, and maybe we can work together or team up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. So we went over to the bar and sat together for a little bit and chatted for a few minutes. And I said, of course, I would love to. We'll share whatever we have. If you want to share stuff, whatever, however you want to do it. And she said, look, this is a happy hour. Because people were coming in and out. And she's like, this is not a good time to have a real serious meeting. So why don't we get together a second time and we can talk more? So we said, okay, fine. So then we set a time to meet downtown Cleveland. And she brought some stuff with her that I thought was helpful. It was this archive.org. Now, I know Lexi knows about this because she's a researching genius. You probably do too, Robert. So you can go back in time and see what someone had on their website long ago. I never knew this. Okay. So she said, hey, look, there's some of these lending programs. These banks are promoting no money down loans. Why are you supposed to go to jail? I'm like, I don't know, but this is good. So anyway, so Dawn and I became friends, and we would periodically meet and exchange information. When the government turned over an evidence disc to me, the aforementioned Jay Milano says, Tony, you have to go through this too, see what you make of it, and you organize the discovery. And I'll do it too, of course, which I don't think he ever did, but he said, but you take it also. So I went to his office, I picked up the evidence disc, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. I'd never been in trouble in my life. I had no friends who were police or prosecutors. I was in a completely different world. I had no idea how any of this worked, and I had no idea how to even analyze or organize an evidence disk. But I said, I wonder if Dawn would help me because she was conversant in this area. And so I asked her, I said, look, I've got this evidence disk. I have no idea how to organize it. And I'd offered already when I first met her to pay her to help us a little bit. And she said, no. I said, look, I'm willing to pay you. I feel like friendship is one thing, but this is like too much. This is too big of a favor.
Yeah.
Can you help me with it? And she said, well, I'll tell you what, I've got class at Cleveland State University, but I'll meet you somewhere. We'll just grab a slice of pizza. We'll talk about it and I'll go there. Or I'll tell you how to do it. So we met, we had a slice of pizza. If anyone's ever had Rascal House pizza, you're better off to eat the box than the actual pizza. But anyway, be that as it may, we headed back to our office, to the real estate company. And this lady is a genius. Dawn, her fingers, she was typing so fast, I thought the keyboard might melt. I'm like, oh my God. And then she's like, oh, we got to set up all these folders. And you guys know how like the manila looking folder on the computer. So she's like, oh, we're going to organize this count by count. And then what's your theory of the case? I'm like, my what? And she's like, your theory of the case, you can have the same piece of paper in different areas. So maybe your theory of the case is there's no fraud at all, or there may be fraud, but I'm not involved, or the bank's the guilty one. You have to have a theory. And then you can, if there's documents that support that, you can put that there too. So she's doing all this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never would have figured any of this out. Anyway, and then of course, my friends adored Dawn. They absolutely adored her. She was very engaging to chat with. She's very alluring. She had a great personality. She was gorgeous. People were just attracted to her, wanted to speak to her, wanted to chat with her. There'd be like a half circle around her all the time. I told her I was going to go to the bakery and steal the take a number thing. And I was going to get out numbers like number 6. Dawn, you get 3 minutes with Dawn Pacellas. Anyway, so my friends just adored her. And so they would say, hey, is Dawn coming to the happy hour? And I used to argue. I said, wait a minute, excuse me. This happy hour is about me. This is to help Tony. Yeah, I know. But I'm just wondering if Dawn's going to be there. And so I was like, wait a minute. So I told her, I said, Dawn, you're more popular than I am. And she said, I'll come to the next one. So anyway, so we had become friends and she was helping with the court stuff. And then on the eve of the first trial, she called very emotional saying, you really got to win this case. I hope you win. I'm really worried about this and I hope you win. And I told her not to worry. It's all good. And I thought that everything was okay, but she was extremely emotional beyond anything I'd ever heard her. I just was talking on the phone with her, but she was really expressing anxiety about the trial. And so I just said, I know you've spent a lot of time and I think it'll work out.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all of that, then, so she helped you mostly through your second trial, correct? Is really
Right.
when.
So I'm convicted in federal court. Okay. But I never violated these bonds or whatever. So they didn't put me in prison immediately. So they said, well, come back for sentencing. And I went to my attorney's office and that's when I discovered that he never paid his investigator and, why he didn't put these witnesses on. And I filed a motion for a new trial and I got my stuff out of there and I fired the guy and I was trying to get a different attorney. And that's when Dawn called. And we'll give you the short version of this because there was a lot of tears and anguish in between. But basically, Dawn contacted me and said, Tony, I have to talk to you. I have to tell you something. And she told me that she lied to me. She said, Tony, I lied to you. I am not a criminal justice graduate student studying criminal defense, working with lawyers in the greater Cleveland area. I work for the prosecutors. I work for Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres, and they were very worried that they were going to lose your trial and that you wouldn't plead guilty. So they had me go on this undercover operation to record your trial preparations. Dawn had actually had a conversation with my attorney, which apparently she had recorded and given to the prosecutor. So this would be like me bugging the U.S. Attorney's Office. Man, I'd like to bug that conference room. Boy, if I could just hear what they're saying, right? Or if I put a wire on one of their administrative employees and said, can you go in there and just record what they're saying? Now, if I did that, you could just see the sanctimonious and pompous obstruction of justice and undermining the fairness of a proceeding, an affront to the public and all this. But they did it to me with Dawn. And Dawn said, Tony, I'm the office manager of the task force. I also know there's a lot of evidence that establishes that you're innocent that's been suppressed. And I was like, what? And I remember thinking, well, you got to tell me I need to know what you know. And she agreed. She said, fine, you have to help me. And she said, I will. But it's complicated. I can't just give you all these records. The government's not just Mark Bennett's not going to say, oh, here's all the missing evidence, case dismissed. They're just dug in so deep and you have no idea about the misconduct. And so she had a front row seat to this. She worked for the prosecutors for 3+ years. She was the office manager of the task force, interacting with all of the people in my case. Dan Caceres,
Mhm.
Catherine Clover, this witness that was actually a paralegal inside the prosecutor's office. So she's involved with all this, and she tells me that there's so much misconduct, enough to choke a horse. And then she also said that they've been systematically suppressing evidence in my case. And she said, Tony, remember, if you didn't trick JP Morgan Chase into making no money down mortgage loans, and if these lenders actually allowed this stuff, you're not the only one that's interested. This is not a DNA case. This is these documents are not, they don't have Tony written on them. It's about whether or not
Mhm.
these lenders allowed these loans and whether or not these documents established there's any fraud. She said there really was no fraud. People said they had no money. They said they didn't have a job. They got loans anyway. So where's the scam? Hey, let's all say we have no money. Oh, okay, that'll trick them for sure.
Hmm.
So anyway, long story short is it was really clear that this lady Dawn had the weight of the world on her shoulders because she felt that 1,000 people were being wrongfully prosecuted and that there was evidence that was being withheld. And she had confronted the prosecutors after they finally interviewed the victim in the case, the lender, only 3 weeks before my first trial. She was in the meeting and basically said, look, you guys, this is a completely fabricated case. These people didn't do anything wrong. And they yelled at her and told her she wasn't allowed to talk like that. And so I guess at that point, she had began actually making sure that evidence didn't disappear. And she made copies of some of these FBI reports and interviews that this guy, Jeff Kassouf, this FBI agent, had conducted with these lenders. And they all said they allow these loans or didn't care or their employees could approve them.
So how did they justify putting her in with you? Did they ever justify it, or did they ever acknowledge it, or did they
Oh,
ever
yes.
address it?
Dawn died
Right.
suspiciously during my second trial. So when someone's deceased, I guess you could say what you want. They have defamed this poor lady in life and death. This guy named Don Cleland, who was also the chairman of this task force, he says, we only told her to record some conversations. She must have recorded other ones on her own. We didn't authorize it. She wanted to do it. It's ridiculous. She wanted to do it. Okay. I want to rob the bank around the corner. Okay. So if I'm in the prosecutor's office, say, hey, I want to go shoot somebody. So they're blaming her. It's all her idea. But I do have proof. There's no question that she was ordered to wear wire. We have absolute proof of it. Dan Caceres said that, oh, you guys are in public places, so there would be no expectation of privacy if you were in an office or a restaurant or something. So it's okay. That's not what federal criminal rule 16 says. What 16 says is any recording with my voice on it, I don't care if we're talking about baseball, has to be turned over before trial. But again, this is a prosecutorial crime spree. This is a spree crime over here. So we didn't turn the
Mhm.
tapes over either. Now we have Mark Bennett. And again, they say different things at different times. First, Mark Bennett blamed the state and said, I didn't hire Dawn. I didn't tell her to do any of this. I don't know. The parents are lying. Their statements are false. And then more recently, he now admits, I knew she was wearing a wire, but I told the FBI to turn over the tapes. Again, a prosecutor's duty is to turn over evidence. The FBI doesn't turn over evidence. So these guys not only don't know what a realtor is and what a loan officer is, they don't know the difference between a prosecutor and an investigator because they're all starting to blame each other. So it's starting to become the circular firing squad that it probably is going to be. Anyway, so they basically have blamed Dawn in her death. I know she did not want to wear a wire. I believe her. I believe she was bullied into doing it. We have a really good private investigator named Bob Frederick. We've gotten some rumors and some tidbits from people, but apparently they asked an undercover cop to do this first, to wear the wire, and the guy said, "Look, it's illegal. The guy's indicted. I'm not doing it." I think they took advantage of Dawn because she was a good person and wanted to do a good job and was ambitious, and I think they took advantage of her desire to do a good job and really forced her into this. But her parents have confirmed, and she told me that she did not want to do it. They basically said, if you want to get ahead, this is the kind of stuff you have to do for us. This guy's no good. So they tee her up to assume that I'm some dastardly guy. And then she's at a happy hour and she's meeting my friends and my cousins. I got a big Italian family in Cleveland. And she's like, how bad could this guy be? This is crazy. If he was a crook, wouldn't have all this support. So she started being very skeptical. Dawn was a very intelligent person, but I remember one time she said, don't tell me what to think. Just give me the facts. And then I'll figure it out myself. And
Mhm.
so I think Dawn started questioning, not just from what she was seeing at these happy hours, but started questioning what the government was doing with these cases. And she was savvy enough to look at the documents and say, this doesn't comport with what we're saying on TV. But the answer is the government has essentially said, well, it doesn't matter. Now, luckily, we have Yale Law School has taken part of my case, and there's a big fight, and we don't have a ruling from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, but we hope to have a good ruling. Again, a judge ordered the government to produce the tapes that Dawn made 10 years ago. Okay. If I was ordered to do something by a federal judge and 10 years later I hadn't, would that be okay?
No,
Probably not.
they'd have you in they would put you in contempt and put you in jail.
Exactly. But when Mark Bennett's ordered to do, they don't really do it's like optional. So again, once again, Yale Law School is in the position of arguing, hey, Your Honor, you should really enforce your rule from November of 2016, and you should really enforce this order that you issued earlier in the case. So anyway, we've got Yale Law School hoping that we either get the tapes, notes that somebody took of the tapes, or an accounting of where they are and why they weren't produced. We really love to have Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres properly deposed by legal counsel. Kim Corral is a Cleveland-based attorney and a very successful lawyer who's gotten quite a lot of people out of prison. So in jail, there's something called R&D, not research and development. It's receiving and discharge. And so Kim's walked into R&D and then walked out with prisoners that were wrongfully convicted because some detective didn't feel like turning over the lineup or whatever they were playing games with. So anyway, so Kim has said this is a violation of Federal 16. It's also a Brady violation because they're trying to get me to admit I'm guilty, or hey, let's just have a trial because I want to be Kim Kardashian and have Twitter followers. And I'm always saying I'm innocent. So Kim's alleging a Brady violation as well and interference with the right to prepare for trial. That's another thing that the government did. It's called a Messiah violation after a 1964 Supreme Court case. The government is not allowed, once you're indicted, to interfere with your trial preparation. You are allowed to go to court and have a trial. And as you may remember from the beginning of our conversation, I wanted to go down and have my lawyer meet with Mark Bennett, accountant meet with Mark Bennett, and I don't own these companies. And they don't, oh, no, we're not going to meet with you. You're a target. We're not going to let your lawyer come down. We're not doing it. We don't want to hear from the real estate lawyer. So they didn't want to meet with me, supposedly. But then what they did is they did an end run around the constitutional right to counsel. So it's called the attachment of the right to counsel. When the government initiates an indictment, that's adverse proceedings. You're entitled to an attorney if the government wants to talk to you. But what they did was they sent Dawn to essentially conduct an uncounseled interview, not in the presence of my lawyer, except the one time when she was lying and saying she was supposedly helping us. So this is an interference in my ability to prepare for trial. This should also have thrown the whole case out. And Mark Bennett should be arrested along with Caceres. These guys, this is not misconduct. These are crimes. This is absolutely illegal. But the answer is we know from a myriad of sources, including Caceres and Bennett, that she was wearing a wire to invade the defense trial preparation. And they've given all kinds of excuses that it was loud and you couldn't really hear, so the tapes were not helpful to you. That's not true.
Doesn't matter either way. Yeah.
We should have gotten them, and we could have had an audio expert potentially take some of the background noise out or listen to them or transcribe them or something. Okay. Maybe there was background noise, but it wasn't. You could have heard if she's wearing a wire on her body, you would have been able to ascertain some of that conversation. And even the fact that they existed, had they been produced before trial, we would have filed a motion to dismiss the case because the government was interfering with the trial preparation. So anyway, this whole thing is unbelievable that it's gone on this long in the U.S. Attorney's Office here. So if you want to break the law, just go work for the U.S. Attorney, particularly in Cleveland. But that you can get away with all this nonsense and there's no accountability. They want, see something, say something. They want you to call the police and tattle on people. You got to call the police. But they don't do anything when something in their own office is wrong to extremes, like the death of this woman. This is not like some little minor matter. This lady's dead. And there's no accountability, no investigation. And this affair with this witness. This is pretty, if this doesn't capture anyone's attention inside the government, I don't know what exactly prosecutors would have to do. What would they have to do to blow up an elementary school? What exactly would they have to do to get somebody to say, wait a minute, this is a bunch of realtors. Like, we're really not going to break the law to this extent to put some nerdy realtor in jail, for the love of God.
Absolutely. It's crazy when you hear it, and people don't realize all that they worked really hard to make a case that wasn't there against you for principle, is what it sounds like.
And others too. I think what happened was, yes, you're right. Yes, they manufactured a case. This is a complete rubbish. The first thing that should have happened in any fraud case is a victim should allege that that they were defrauded or deprived of money. So that's the first thing that should be required. Not the government.
There has to be a victim. There has to be a victim.
Correct. It's an element of the offense, and they weren't victims. So the non-victim issue right there defeats the entire case. and the case is incorrect because they actually weren't victims. They were knowing and enthusiastic lenders that wanted to make loans. They couldn't wait to make loans. I have documents that Dawn gave me. One lender waived people signing the documents. They were so excited to make the loan. So there's no fraud. They just didn't care. They made the loans. There was no what's called material misrepresentation. So just even somebody lies, it doesn't mean they should go to jail. So if you tell the loan officer your dress is really pretty, but you think it's ugly, you're lying. But that's not material to the lending decision.
Right.
So the idea that the Justice Department is going to run around and say, "Oh my gosh, these," and most of the loans applications say that the people made no money. But I guess the issue is, I'm the guy nuts enough to say, take the indictment and stick it. And I said it on TV. I said, this is absolute crap. Most people didn't. So they hate my guts. But I do think they also are worried that 1,000 of these cases could go kaput, because by the time I'm raising all this holy heck, they're really deep into it. They've already indicted a lot of people. There are people who paid. By the way, this is another Cleveland special. There's actually people. There's a guy named Tony Geraci, a guy named Steve Greenwald, Steve Lash. They paid money, and poof, the case goes away. It's scrubbed off the website. It's not on the docket anymore. It's sealed. Okay. The racketeering charges. So the people were indicted in these racketeering cases, RICO, all this mobster activity. Oh, actually, now case dismissed. And then they scrubbed the stuff off of the court websites. They paid, quote, restitution. So this is a prosecution for profit scheme. And I just think they're used to, you can just tell when you read Mark Bennett's emails and Dan Caceres' emails, they never really thought any of this would see the light of day, and they didn't care because they just do whatever they want. And the most ridiculous example, and I probably shouldn't even say it because it's a little salacious, but there's salacious emails, and one of the attorneys—
You can touch on that if you want. You can. Yeah.
Okay, it's a family program, but whatever. So anyway, so Caceres is bragging about getting hand jobs in one of these emails. And so one of the lawyers reading this crap is like, Tony, it's one thing to get one, and then it's another one to put it in writing. What are these guys putting in writing? They're putting in writing about altering documents. They're actually talking about altering documents inside the prosecutor's office. Now, you would think that might be something you would say, psst, in the elevator, hey, let's forge that. They're actually sending emails about altering documents. They're actually sending emails about using perjured testimony to win. Catherine Clover's lying, but we can't let Tony find out about it. Oh my gosh. And then they say it's in the interest of justice to lie, because if she didn't lie, they couldn't win the case against me, and then I would be acquitted. So we can't have that. They're actually putting in writing that it's in the interest of justice to lie. Perjured testimony is required to win the case. That's material, because they're saying we gotta lie. Because this lady claimed I told her to lie in her loan applications. So we have to have that lie in there. Otherwise, there's no evidence against Tony. So Mark Bennett, the federal prosecutor, is saying we have to use perjured testimony to win the case. And if we don't have it, we'll lose the case. So there's no better example of knowing use of perjured testimony, I don't think, in American jurisprudence, because they know she's lying. They continue to use her. They put in writing she's lying. Generally, prosecutors are a little smarter than Mark Bennett. So what they would say is, we didn't know she was lying. You allege that she was lying, but the defense attorney had sufficient opportunity to cross-examine the witness, and it's a jury deliberation or a jury determination, and that's unapproachable. We can't get into the jury room. So that's usually what they would say. But Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres are so stupid and so reckless and don't think that they'll ever be caught and feel so invincible. They're actually sending emails about how she's lying. We can't let Tony find out about it. They're actually putting this, and there's a guy named Jay Schlackett, who's a defense lawyer. This is one of my favorite guys. He's Catherine Clover's lawyer, okay, who's in an affair with Dan Caceres. He's also Dan Caceres' lawyer, and he's also Susan Caceres, who's his wife, and she got wind of this affair, and they separated for a while, and they had a separation agreement that was written by Jay Schlackett. So this is unbelievable. This is an open sewer in this prosecutor's office with these chummy defense lawyers. The whole thing is unbelievable what's actually going on here. But the stuff is all in writing. It's crazy.
It sounds to me like they felt like they could put it in writing because it didn't matter, because everybody was going to plead guilty. Because it was easier to plead guilty, to make it go away. Plead guilty, pay the money, make it go away. And then you come along and you're like, nope. And then they have all this stuff, and they just don't know what to do with it. So they just suppressed it.
Yeah, and I think they got hot and bothered, and they got all lathered up, and they just completely lost any sense of fairness or legalities or anything. They got all riled up and testosteroned out, and how dare you not plead guilty, and how dare you go on TV. They just expected me to plead guilty. Thank you for prosecuting me and destroying my company.
Guys, thank you for joining us. We're going to come back later in the week with the second part of this episode to finish up. And thank you guys, and have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Broken System Podcast. We hope you found our discussion thought-provoking and engaging.
If you enjoy what you hear and want to support the show, please consider joining our Patreon community. You can find us at patreon.com/The Broken System Podcast. Your contributions help keep the podcast running and allow us to bring you more insightful content.
Don't forget to connect with us on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay updated on upcoming episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and more. You can find us on all by searching The Broken System Podcast.
And finally, if you love what we do, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews not only make our day, but they also help others discover the podcast.
Thank you once again for your support. Together we can continue to challenge the broken systems around us and strive for positive change. Until next time, take care and stay tuned.